Good morning, everyone. The throne of St. Peter stands empty today. The body of Pope Paul VI now lying in state at his summer residence, where he died yesterday at the age of 80. Memorial services are taking place around the world for the spiritual leader of the Roman Catholic Church, the victim of a heart attack. ABC's Stuart Lawrence has more from Italy.
The Vatican's press officer announced here in Rome this morning that the sudden death Sunday night of Pope Paul was caused by a combination of a urinary infection, high blood pressure that brought on a heart attack, and an acute accumulation of fluid in his lungs. These complications came in quick succession, despite medical efforts through Saturday night and all day Sunday by the Pope's two doctors and a consulting urologist. The body of Pope Paul will be lying in state at the Papal Summer Palace in Castel Gandolfo, where he died, before being brought back to the Vatican for the 9 days of traditional funeral ceremonials. The cardinals resident in Rome today hold the first of the series of meetings that will lead to the final conclave to elect a successor to Pope Paul. And other cardinals from around the world are now beginning to arrive here in Rome. This evening, the first of the masses for Pope Paul will be celebrated in St. Peter's Basilica by the canons of the Basilica. Stuart Lawrence, ABC News, Rome.
When news that the Pope was gravely ill spread, people began to gather in front of Castel Gandolfo, the Pope's summer palace outside Rome. For the first time since he became Pope 15 years ago, Paul VI on Sunday canceled his traditional blessing. His doctor had confined him to bed. While he was resting, he suffered a heart attack, and 4 hours later, he was dead.
Well, we just thought we'd pay our respects and well, I think it's interesting to see the way the Italian people would react to it, and it really has been quite different than I thought it would be. I thought there would be more people mourning for him, and there really hasn't been anyone noticeable. There were a few people crying last night when we left the opera, but it just sort of seemed like everyone was in shock and things have just gone on as they usually do.
The crowd outside learned of his death immediately. Within hours, newspapers, radio, and television had informed Italy and the world. The first Mass honoring the dead Pope was held in the church of San Tommaso da Villanova in the town outside Castel Gandolfo. Pope Paul had several times recently spoken of dying, but this seems to have been no more than an old man's awareness of age. His doctors had described him as being in reasonably good health. This morning, the crowds outside Castel Gandolfo had multiplied. The Pope's body will be taken to the Vatican, where it will lie in state for 3 days before burial in St. Peter's.
Roman Catholic cardinals from all over the world have been told to come to Rome. The College of Cardinals must meet here at the Vatican within 18 days to elect a new pope. However, there's no obvious front runner, and the election could go to anyone. Jack Smith, ABC News, Rome.
The death of Pope Paul sets in motion the ritual secret balloting for cardinals to select the new pope. Among the non-Italian candidates, Argentina's Cardinal Pironio, Australia's Cardinal Koenig, and Cardinal Willebrands of the Netherlands. More likely choices, however, Italian Cardinal Baggio, Pinadoli, or Benelli, all with long-time involvement in Vatican affairs. The College of Cardinals is charged with replacing a man who steered the Roman Catholic Church cautiously through troubled times. Born Giovanni Battista Montini, he was elected pontiff in 1963, took the name of Paul, and became known as the Pilgrim Pope. More on his life from ABC's Bob Brown.
He traveled in the provinces of the people he served, even in his early years as Archbishop of Milan. And he traveled as a pilgrim to the Holy Land soon after he became Pope Paul. It was the beginning of an unprecedented series of trips to 16 nations on 6 continents. I am an apostle on the move, he said. He was the most traveled pontiff in history and the first ever to visit the United States. In New York, he received a spontaneous tribute at St. Patrick's Cathedral. And the Mass he delivered at Yankee Stadium was quickly nicknamed the Sermon on the Mound. But his travels also made him vulnerable. On his last trip abroad to Manila, he had to be shielded from a man who tried to kill him with a knife. And within the closer realms of his authority, his papal rule was marked by conflict over his condemnations of artificial birth control and abortion, over his strong reaffirmation of priestly celibacy. In earlier times, he might have been known as a progressive pope. But the 60s and 70s were years of doctrinal experimentation in the Catholic Church, of a disaffection among priests that the Pope called his crown of thorns. Late in June, he said he felt his death nearing, and he appealed to rebels to spare further risks to the Church. On his papacy, he said, "It has cost me much suffering." But he also once offered a glimpse of his personal philosophy, one that may have helped guide what friends described as a warm private personality that was always partially hidden in public. He said, "Look up to heaven when you fly, and fear nothing." Bob Brown, ABC News.
Around the world today, prayers for the soul of Pope Paul. A memorial mass being held this morning at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, where Terence Cardinal Cook spoke of the late pontiff's saintly and courageous life. Pope Paul was remembered at a similar service here in Washington last evening. ABC's Bettina Gregory has that story.
As Catholics turned out to mourn the Pope's passing at Mass, His Eminence William Cardinal Baum, the Archbishop of Washington, took a profoundly religious view of his death. Cardinal Baum said His Holiness had been called from his sufferings home to his God.
In our own church today is the feast of the Transfiguration of our Lord, a day when we celebrate the glory of Christ, a glory that was manifested even before his suffering and his death. So it is a beautiful day on which to die.
And a beautiful day, the Cardinal said, to reflect on Pope Paul the man. Cardinal Baum said he knew the Pope well, had a private audience with him in Rome last June, and he said the Pope never failed to ask about secular problems here at home.
He was particularly interested always to know about race relations in Washington. He knows the history of our country, the sometimes painful, tragic history of flawed relations between the races. So he always spoke to me about the importance of reconciling, uniting people of different races. With all, he came through always as a man profoundly aware, with an acute understanding of what was happening, and also as a man of most profound compassion and gentleness. He combined this strength with gentleness.
Cardinal Baum says he'll travel to Rome to attend the Pope's funeral, then take part in the election of a new Pope. But the Cardinal says any speculation about who might become Pope Paul's successor is forbidden by church law. Bettina Gregory, ABC News, Washington.
Now a look at today's weather forecast.